Hey, how's it going? Welcome back. Today we're doing a gear review on the Maag Audio Magnum-K compressors. I'd like to think of these more as channel strips than I would compressors, even though the compressors are the staple features of the unit. Section 1 is going to be our gain structure section, featuring input attenuation as well as input gain. Section 2 is going to feature the Magnum compressor with optional, what I would call tonal options for feed forward and feedback modes. Section 3 is going to feature the K comp. Section 4 is going to feature a parallel equalizer. I'd like to mention that the EQ is not positioned in the chain directly after the compressor, so it's not in series. So you're not running the compressed signal into the equalizer. You're taking a compressed signal and then using a parallel equalizer to boost that signal. So it's almost as if they're two separate units, even though they're running through the same signal flow. The last section is going to be the output section, which also features a soft limiter and link functionality. Let's go back and talk about the gain structure first, which I feel is very important because the disadvantage I feel to a lot of compressors is the lack of being able to adjust the input gain going into the compressor. As many people know, compressors such as 1176s and other things of that nature, the gain structure going into the compressor essentially drives how the compressor compresses. What the Magnum-Ks give us the ability to do is to attenuate the input signal before pushing into the compressor. So what we can do then is, if the signal is too hot or is giving us undesirable results into the compressor, we can then attenuate the signal down to the gain structure that we prefer, possibly cleaner or something of that nature. And then we could use the input gain to then boost that attenuated signal into the compressor. So we're able to actually structure the gain signal before even reaching the compressor versus just using whatever gain structure is currently present. I find this to be a very, very useful feature. The second is going to be the Magnum compressor section, a great compressor for tracking, for mixing, and for mastering. Now, to kind of go through the settings, the range is going to be an option between 4, 8, 12, and 16. This is essentially the amount of gain reduction we're getting on the signal. The lighter is going to be used for more tasteful, softer compression. The higher numbers are going to be used for more aggressive compression. In a tracking situation like vocals, these are amazing vocal units. You could easily get away with 12, whereas in a mix bus context, I like it on 4 generally. The next thing is going to be the ratio. Same thing kind of applies. Higher ratio for more limited settings, lower ratio for more compression settings, and the lowest ratio is extremely gentle. It is a mastering grade component, so you can easily get away with the lowest ratio for mastering and mix bus work. I use it all the time. Fantastic. The next is going to be the threshold. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We're going to lower or higher where the threshold is. Next, we have the side chain. Every compressor, in my opinion, especially in 2018, should feature a side chain, which is going to remove the low frequency energy from triggering the compressor. This side chain goes from 40 up to 220 and also has the option for an external side chain to be connected with a separate hardware EQ via the XLR cables on the back. Also very handy if you own like a Dangerous Bax or a Cush Electra, or anything that has really good filters built into it, or even just a standard graphic EQ by DBX or something like that also works very great. But it gives you that option to really focus on the mid-range and the high end if you really wanted to. Next, we have the tonal options within the Magnum compressor section, and this is feedboard and feedback modes. Both offer unique sonic characteristics. One is more open sounding, the other one is a little bit more gelled sounding. Ultimately, it's great to have flexibility with the shape and the tone of the compression circuit. After that, we've got the staple, which is the K comp. It's essentially an optical compressor which is working on the harshness range. This is a really advantageous thing, especially when you're tracking vocals for peaky singers. It's almost like you're using it as like a high frequency limiter or a de-esser. So it's very smooth. The whole unit has a great smoothness to it. It's got a gloss to it, but it also, with the side chain, can add a nice pumping effect. It's clean, but it can be colored depending on how hard you push it. The same goes with the Maag Audio EQs. They can be extremely colored by resetting your gain structure in a different way. So again, versatility all the way with it. So I like using the K comp section for any harshness that I want to get out. And I treat it like a high frequency limiter, which I think is extremely advantageous. Now, you might be asking, well, wait a second, if I'm dipping out, let's say 3K, how am I going to make that back up? That's where the parallel equalizer comes into play, because now I've got the EQ2 circuit built into this. And as an EQ2 owner, I will say these sound a little bit better than the 500 series EQ. So by better, it's a very subjective term, of course. I would simply say more open. The EQ2 in the 500 series distort a little bit quicker, have more of a harmonic saturation, while these are a little bit more what I would call mastering grade and have a more open 3D and kind of airy sound to them. So whatever it is that you're most interested in, you easily can get away with using both. I think they're really great in multiple different contexts. So the parallel equalizer features, like I said, the EQ2. So it's a low and a top end EQ featuring the AIR band. This is essentially how you're going to make up what you quote unquote lost when using the K comp section. So if you need to then boost on top of that to re-inject the air back into the circuit, you can do that. What I love is it also features the low band, and the low band offers the option of either the wide or the tight bell with different frequency points on each band. The sub feature is probably the coolest thing about it, especially for electronic genres. And this goes as well for the EQ2s and the EQ4s by Maag Audio. The sub band just sounds really great, very punchy, very open sounding. And it is the trick that I use to get a really tight low end on many of the records that I mix. So ultimately, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck in the channel strip, and we haven't even gotten to the last section yet, which is going to be the output section and the soft limiter. Now, these units can be linked if you have two of them, which is great. I have two, as you can see right here, and I use them often in dual mono mode. I generally don't see the reason to link them. I guess if you were doing mastering purposes and you want a really, really tight stereo image, you could do that. For EDM, a little flexibility, in my opinion, is a good thing, and a little variance in the stereo image is an attribute. So I generally run these in dual mono at all times. The soft limiter is very cool. It's a very musical limiter. It's very tasteful, and it adds a little bit of grit to it. So this is, again, where you can get a little color out of the unit. If you're looking for something that isn't as clean getting up to this point in the signal path, you can definitely throw that on. A little too aggressive in a mastering context. Mix bus context does sound pretty good. Tracking context sounds amazing. So no matter what you're using them on, the soft limiter definitely has its functionality. So in the mix, I guess you could say they thrive. I think that my favorite place to use them, and has been for quite some time now, is on the mix bus. This is where I dial in my gain structure going into the rest of my mix bus chain, which is all right here, as you can see in the center strip. This is kind of my analog mix bus chain. So I use this first in the chain to like set the structure going into the rest of the gear. It also works at the end of the chain to set it up before going to the limiter or something like that. The compressors I usually use in tandem, where I'm using a little bit of both and then using the parallel equalizer at the end to boost the signal that I lost. The price point is up there for a pair of them, but for what you're getting, if you really think about it, I know a lot of people would think, okay, like $2,300 or whatever it might be for a one rack U is kind of costly, but I would consider this a channel strip just like I would a Neve or a Focusrite or an API or something like that, to where, like I said, you're getting 5 different processors, so to speak, that we discussed here. And I feel that that's extremely advantageous, because if you're working in a home studio, especially up to the professional studio, and you are doing a wide range of work, a wide range of genres, and everything from tracking to mastering, you can use these compressors in every application, and they will fit into your workflow on a daily basis. Unlike some gear, which kind of sits in the rack and only makes it on a mix 30% of the time, I find that these could be used every day very easily.